All right, thanks for coming. You may have noticed that the schedule got changed slightly. I'm not Stefan, in case I look like Stefan. It shouldn't be anything anyone got confused. I'm Christopher. I work on Anoma and Nemata. I am not really going to talk about those, although maybe you can intuit for yourself how this topic is related. I'm going to talk about the theory and practice of scale-free money, aka breaking the crypto wheel. This talk comes with a content warning. To quote MJ, who declared an intent in a Telegram chat, quote, "We are definitely in the market for declarative speculative ideas like this. The more declarative and speculative, the better. You know, I see your intent, I match your intent, I take no responsibility. Here there are theoretical dragons. This talk has not been mathematically verified. Caveat emptor." Right, so this talk is about three things in three sections. One, what is the theory of money? Two, a candidate theory, scale-free money. Three, why should crypto care? Let's start with money. Now this word is very loaded. So I know I'm introducing some risk by bringing it into the talk, but part of what I hope this talk will convince you is that rather than treating theories of money as something that we kind of edge around on Twitter or call narrative or call memes, we take them seriously as a science. And I'm going to try to define a little bit what I mean by that. I'm going to break this down into four parts. What is money? What is the theory of money? Components of a theory of money. And finally, why should we seek a neutral theory, and what does that mean? So what is money? I'm going to keep this pretty high level because the specifics, even if you represent it with, let's say, a non-totally ordered consensus protocol, as discussed in the last talk, the specifics don't matter for the rest of this presentation. I'm just going to take money as a giant symbolic database. It has many tokens with units and owners, maybe UTXO, maybe account, doesn't really matter. But what makes it interesting, and really why we call it money, is that it's endowed with some special social semantics. And these I will talk about next. But first, who are the parties involved? I'm just going to call them users. Users, hopefully most of the users are still humans. It becomes less and less certain by the day if that's the case, but it doesn't matter for this theory. So user is whoever is using money. A user acts in the world. They might possess some physical resources, a capacity for physical action, the ability to make a sandwich, hand you a sandwich, the ability to make a talk, give a talk, the ability to make a cryptocurrency, some physical resources. They can read and write to this database of money. And probably, at least often, in the interesting cases, users have preferences. If they don't have preferences, we can give up this coordination system stuff and go home. So it's a safe assumption. Now, what is a theory of money? So a theory of money, to me, is a mathematical construction that specifies how to use this database as a tool from the perspective of the user, to move the world towards a state they prefer. So we all know tools like, a shovel. You take a shovel, you hold it in your hands, you dig up some dirt, and you put it, over there because you're planting. Recently I planted some carnivorous plants in my apartment, and I used a little wooden spoon as a shovel because I didn't have a proper shovel. But okay, so this shovel was a tool. I had a theory of how to use it to move the dirt. I used that theory to inform my action as I moved the dirt around to get the dirt where I wanted it to be. So money is like this, just incredibly more abstract. But what I think is critical about this theory is it's a theory of how to use money as a means towards the pursuit of some other values that the user has, things they would like to see in the world or directions they would like the world to move in. So to me, a theory of money does not include a lot of other questions that sometimes go under this name, and I want to delineate them specifically. Some questions that I think are not relevant to simply what is a theory of money are, one, why do we have money? There's some interesting explanations for, money is sourcing from barter. If you read some Adam Smith, you'll get that. As far as I can tell, after reading more into it, it turns out to have been cribbed from some Arab thinkers in the 1200s, but neither here nor there. Another question, not relevant, what is the history of money? That's some interesting data, but we're just trying to define a mathematical abstraction. Question 3, what is the one true money? Bitcoin is money, Ether is money, Celestia is money, modular money. No. Interesting question, but it's not the question that I'm talking about in this talk. No shade towards those protocols specifically, just examples. Fourth question that I'm not talking about, what is valuable? No one is going to agree on this question, and part of the point later in this talk is that we should come up with a theory of money that does not require that we agree on this question, because we will just debate this endlessly. It's a waste of time. Okay. Not going to answer those questions. What I am going to talk about, though, are components of a theory of money. To me, a theory of money must have basically three components. One, inputs. Inputs are choices the user makes, so I'll give some examples of these later in the talk. So things that the user can do with money. They might spend it, they might accept it, they might trade it, these sorts of things. Two are outcomes. These are things that the user measures. You know, I can measure whether or not I get a sandwich. I can measure in sort of more abstract and temporally distant ways what the climate is like in the world. And three is a causal model, which is a theory of how these inputs and the inputs of others affect the outputs. So to go back to my example of a miniature shovel, if I have a miniature shovel, I have a theory that, like, if I move my hands in such and such a way, the shovel will move up. I have a theory about how dirt responds, namely it responds to gravity. And if I put the dirt on top of the shovel, it will stay on top of the shovel and I can move it around. A theory of money is just like this, more abstract. And this causal model in particular is key because this is what informs the user of what they should do to use the system in a way which aligns with the direction in which they would like the world to move, both in the kind of short term, like do I get a sandwich, and in the kind of long term, like is the environment reasonable? To harken back to the first talk today, you know, are we moving towards a more interesting equilibrium of nations or coordination, or are we just kind of stuck in a cycle? Inputs. So some example inputs. And I'll get into these in a candidate theory later in the talk, but I'm just going to cover 5 here. One is to accept a token in exchange for an act. So for example, I could accept $5 in exchange for a sandwich. I can give you the sandwich. That's a kind of capacity of action that I have, and I can choose what tokens to accept for it. Another kind of input would be to hold a token, perhaps participate in some governance over where the issuance of that token goes. A third input would be to spend a token, hopefully, you know, typically in exchange for an act. If I give you $5, you know, I'm not really like guaranteed to get a sandwich. Like, you still have freedom, so I could give you $5 and it's kind of a donation, and I'm just hoping that you will give me a sandwich. Of course, we operate implicitly on the expectation that I will in fact get a sandwich, but it's not guaranteed. Fourth kind of input would be to swap one token for another token, and I'll get into what that might mean later. And a fifth would be to lend a token, perhaps with collateral in another. There are many more kinds of inputs. These are just 5 kind of typical ones, and they're ones that we do in blockchain networks of today all of the time. So I think they're helpful to discuss. Outputs. So there are many outputs, and I won't try to even categorize them. Except that I will break them into 2 groups, which are the individual and immediate outputs, like do I get a sandwich, do I get a tree, do I move this? Well, you don't need money to move dirt, but you know, do I get the thing which I'm trying to get in the immediate future? And perhaps the composite or collective future outputs. Do we produce some kind of plural good, some kind of community or ecosystem that's valuable to us? Do we you know, regulate carbon emissions well enough to keep the atmosphere within certain bounds? These are example outputs. So the causal model is what describes their relationship from the perspective of a user in terms of the inputs that they can make and the outputs that they care about. This typically is going to include 2 parts of causation. One of them is very easy to track, and the other is kind of more difficult. The one that's very easy to track is causation in the database. So for example, if I am accepting a particular asset, spending a particular asset, swapping particular assets, you know, we have these nice auditable databases called blockchains, and we can track where that issuance is going, you know, requiring some additional inputs from out in the world of what it's being used to fund, but we can at least track like what the payments are. So this causation in the database is part of the causal model. That's, say, part of the protocol. But the second part is causation outside the database. Causation outside the database is like your model of the world. So if, you know, you can track in the database, if I use this token, then my currency is going here. It's funding this carbon capture device. But then you must, in order to, if what you care about ultimately is the climate, you must have a theory of how what that carbon capture device does affects the climate. This is your causal model of the world, because the outputs you care about are the kind of sum total of all of these, or product, some total product of all of these factors. So I would say the causation outside the database is not really part of a theory of money, but it's a parameter that the user will consider in making choices, because it affects, you know, how their inputs affect the outputs that they value. So I want to distinguish here between theories of money versus theories of databases. Most talks in this event, and a lot of the talks that I've previously given, I would say are really just about theories of databases. Theories of databases are theories about how databases works, how a database works. Whereas a theory of money is about how a database works in relation to the world outside the database. This distinction is important because it affects how users see the system and what kind of promises we can make to users about how their inputs will affect the outputs that they observe in the world. So just to make this more concrete, Some examples of database theory, blockchain research, intents are kind of like a general declarative database theory, but they're still talking about how to get what you want in the database system, not how to get what you want in the world. And I would argue these theories leave a problem unsolved, which is how to get what you want in the world. This is the theory of money problem that I'm talking about here. Now, the great challenge, to use a word that's become very popular in the zeitgeist, is that money is an intersubjective tool. The effects of your actions are not only conditioned on the actions of others, they're entirely conditioned on the acts of others. This database is imaginary. If I, transfer you 5 Ether, that has absolutely zero impact unless you believe something that causes you to take action based on that change in the database. So there's no objectivity here. It's purely intersubjective. If we look at this in terms of some kind of causal diagram here, we have user A, maybe that's me. I have some theory of money that informs how I make changes in this database to try and pursue my values. Then user B, maybe that's MJ. MJ looks at this database and says, oh, like I interpret these changes in such and such a way, and this will change my actions in such and such a way. And given that the thing which I'm trying to ultimately, understand the behavior of is the world, which is affected by both of our actions, if I want to be able to reason about what MJ is going to do in response to my changes, and therefore be able to reason about what kinds of changes I should make in order to move towards the world which I want, I need to understand not only my theory of money, but also MJ's theory of money. This is what makes things tricky. And this is why I argue that we need a neutral theory of money. So currently in the world, we have a lot of implicit theories of money. Often these things are barely theories. They're like statements. X is money, Y is money. These are some statements, USD is money, ETH is money, Bitcoin is money. And we're dueling over these on Twitter and in complex ways with governments. It's just not clear to me that this is necessary. So in particular, we're never going to be able to agree on what we value, what we want in the world. So if we want the ability to agree on a theory of money, rather than that theory of money declaring a particular thing to be valuable, like BTC or ETH or USD, we would want to come up with a theory that doesn't make any decisions about what is valuable, that is kind of parameterized over the specific choices of assets, specific choices of what those assets represent in the world. Which therefore allows users who disagree on values to still agree on this theory. So, part 2, a candidate theory, which I'm calling, for now, scale-free money. The basic idea of scale-free money is pretty simple, and this is like a theory of how to use money. So in this theory of how to use money, you start by defining some values or objectives, things that you want to see in the world, and associating different denominations, different tokens, in crypto speak, with those values. You then use issuance of those denominations to fund progress towards whatever objectives you've kind of delineated as different values. And the holders of those tokens vote on which objectives are worth pursuing. You'll notice that this doesn't look all that similar to what's going on in the crypto sphere today. It's just maybe not understood in this way. Now, to talk a little bit about dynamics here, one dynamic of scale-free money is that you always have to make a hard decision about like which values are codependent enough that you want to make them one thing and which values are independent enough that you want to make them separate things. So there will be many, many denominations, as many as distinct values and objectives, which are worth representing as distinct. These denominations will always be created, destroyed. Sometimes they will merge or split. We don't see this so much in crypto networks yet, but it's very possible and would make sense in a world of kind of flux. And they're always shifting around. In particular, the mechanism that I think you need to make this work in practice is that you need an infrastructure which allows you to easily separate unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value, so that people don't have to agree on all of their, they don't have to agree on denominations in order to interact, and they don't pay any kind of UX penalty for disagreeing on denominations, as long as they agree on the parameters of the specific interaction. So crypto is really good at this. It's already like mostly going in this direction. And Anoma hopes to help with some of these specific infrastructure problems. Also, in this world of scale-free money, I think the units in play are often going to be invisible to the human user, at least most of the time. So rather than just having tokens that are kind of discussed on Twitter or something like this, we might have tokens just created between peer-to-peer nodes for network bandwidth, for storage, for compute, that are changing hands more or less autonomously, and are created and go away all of the time. Only some of these tokens will rise to the level of surface conscious awareness. One particular thing which I think is kind of characteristic of this kind of money, or this kind of usage of money, is that it's scale neutral. So if we look in the world today at kind of coordination structures and monetary control, and I should have included crypto on this, but it's still down in the local currency side of things, is that we have a very asymmetric graph of scale versus control over some kind of locus of money. So we have some local currencies, some like crypto, some small scale stuff at the left, and then we have all the way at the right, talking about hundreds of millions of people involved in some kind of governance structure, we have fiat currencies. And everything in the middle is basically unserved. There's no like locus of monetary control at that level. And I think if you look at a kind of first principles approach where you try and associate denominations of money with different values, you would see a graph that looks much more like the one on the right, where you have many different locuses of control, as in different different denominations, different governance functions for issuance, different things being funded, different values and objectives, and they are much more evenly balanced, probably not exactly evenly balanced, but much more evenly balanced versus scale. Because if you think of like, you have some, say, public goods which are relevant to your family, some public goods which are relevant to your small community or town, 1,000 people, some which are relevant to 100,000 people, some which are relevant to millions, tens of millions, and ultimately up to the scale of nation states, at which I think we would still have denominations of money, but they wouldn't be quite so dominant. So now I'm going to talk about the causal model of scale-free money with respect to all of these inputs. So what does it mean to say to a user that we can kind of say something about how you impact the outputs that you care about when you take one of these actions, accepting, spending, swapping, holding, lending. And you'll notice that I've kept these things abstract because I think from the perspective of the user and from the perspective of a theory of money, a lot of the specifics like kind of don't matter so much. It doesn't really matter if you're using UTXOs or accounts. It doesn't really matter if you're using one specific representation or another. The thing you care about is what the token you're transacting in represents in the world and how the kind of action you're taking impacts potential for action and the outputs you want to see. So accepting a token creates an offer of an act or good, like let's say a sandwich, which is accessible to those who possess the token in question. So in some sense, insofar as they want this thing like a sandwich, it gives that token some value. And we think often, when I spend my money to get a sandwich, we think very obviously that I will get a sandwich. That's the thing I'm getting out of this interaction. But the other side of that is that I'm also giving, let's say, whatever this currency is, if I'm accepting USD for a sandwich, I'm giving USD some value. In virtue of my so doing, because some people want sandwiches. So the collective effect here is lending weight to an objective insofar as the product of action, the product of my action, which I'm offering to accept the token for, is desired. Now let's talk about spending. So spending a token creates an offer of a token in exchange for an act or good. As an individual, maybe I swapped the examples last slide, but here I give my token, I get my sandwich. As a collective, I offer those, the collective effect is that I offer those who accept this token an option to convert their action, like making a sandwich, into some voting weight and into this token which others might accept for their own actions. So you'll see there's always this dual, the like individual effect and the collective effect. The causal model of swapping tokens is to create an offer. Let's say I'm swapping A for B, then I create an offer for someone else to receive A in exchange for B. So the individual effect here is that I lose some voting weight and exposure associated with A and gain some associated with B. And the collective effect is that I give everyone who holds B an option to swap with B, and that I swap with one specific holder. Now, if you think of tokens as having governance rights, there's also a kind of collective interest in who holds them, because anyone involved in a governance system knows that it really matters who you're doing governance with. So the holders of A and B might actually want to price discriminate who can swap their tokens. This is not something we think about in crypto a lot. We might think of price discrimination as bad, and there are definitely like complexities here that I don't want to gloss over. But there is a real interest held by the holders of A and B here in choosing who is participating in governance. Holding a token simply means keeping it. The individual effect here is that I have governance rights over issuance flows, and that I have some exposure to, of course, things that people may be willing to accept the token for in the future. The collective effect is that I demonstrate some kind of commitment, and as we see in, say, crypto networks, this can really help with social coordination. Everyone thinks they're part of a club, and they have some shared interest in the future, and this helps people actually coordinate to think about things and build things together. And that I'm also providing some kind of collective intelligence in the governance function for decisions over issuance. The causal model of lending. Lending a token creates an offer to borrow in exchange for some kind of collateral and future payback. The individual effect is that you lose the ability to lose the token for a while, and maybe you gain some interest, whatever you're getting in return for lending. The collective effect is that you can give another party liquidity without changing ownership. So in particular, I postulate that, and I haven't defined all of this mathematically, just kind of in concepts, but I postulate that this definition of scale-free money is neutral. It doesn't say anything about what is valuable or which denominations you should be using or how you should be using them. It doesn't say anything about like what they are supposed to be representing in the world and what you should choose to deem worthy of representation. But it does say something about how these actions in the database relate to what kind of impacts you have in the world, parameterized over what these tokens are actually used to represent. And I think that kind of neutrality means that this theory can be agreed upon by people and groups who do not agree on what they want. They can still agree on this theory because it just allows them to represent things clearly. So why should crypto care? I think that at the moment, crypto is kind of stuck in a wheel. This wheel takes in some inputs. One input is public capital. Another input, kind of slowly being burned, is public credibility. Another input, still present in this event, which is lovely, but definitely in danger, is internal cultural integrity. This wheel spins around. It produces some progress in applied cryptography. We're doing a lot there. And it produces some progress in database engineering. But ultimately, it's self-terminating. You cannot give up cultural integrity and public credibility forever. Those are finite resources. They will be spent out. I think this wheel is also kind of a microcosm of the world economy, but we should probably fix our problems here at home first. So crypto is stuck in a wheel. And I think we kind of have some things and lack some things that we need to get out of this state. We have some amount of class consciousness, like a self-understanding as a movement, as crypto. And we have some amount of, certainly present at this event, technological and research discourse. However, we do not have any kind of coordinated control of internal value flows based on an actual theory of like what we need to produce some kind of product. And of course, very relatedly, we do not have a unified theory of what crypto is, what it is that we're providing to the world as a whole, not just as individual projects. So I postulate that this kind of theory of money can at least gesture towards a theory for what crypto is. The world sees crypto as one thing. At the moment, it sees crypto as an investment class. Most of the world sees crypto as an investment class. Internally, crypto sees itself as many things. It sees itself as a technology development ecosystem. It sees itself as protocols, perhaps competing on features, speed, efficiency, stuff like this. And a theory of money, I think, could provide for roles for these different specific parts, different technological components, but also an understanding of how they fit into some kind of whole, and a way to explain that whole to the rest of the world. This kind of theory of money, in particular, I think can help us articulate a vision to the rest of the world of what a world with crypto would look like that isn't just make people rich in the existing system. This is the vision that we're articulating at the moment, implicitly or explicitly. It's easy for those of us who are involved in the technology to kind of stand internal to our companies and hire other people to like deal with, the capital and ignore this problem, but it won't work, so we should stop trying. And we can organize our actions and resource allocations internally on the basis of this theory of what crypto is as a whole, and kind of present a consistent product to the rest of the world. In particular, one kind of method of implementation of this, I think, is to stop debating what is money in any particular sense. We spend a lot of time debating bad theories for what is money, like, I don't know, base layer value capture, what will be money, X will be money, Y will be money. These theories, frankly, they don't deserve to be called theories. They're not theories. They're like statements on Twitter, they're images. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're not theories. They're all doomed to fail. We should stop trying. It's just a waste of time, zero-sum game. Values are always in flux, and money will be too. There's not going to be like a final form of the one true money. This is sort of Lord of the Rings-esque. So maybe we all just internalized that too much at age 10. Maybe that was just me. Either way, how do we dog food scale-free money? So if we actually take this theory seriously and apply it to crypto, what does that look like? Well, 4 steps from before. 1, define some values or objectives. 2, associate denominations with those values. 3, use issuance to fund progress towards those objectives. And 4, holders vote on what objectives are worth pursuing, denominations, split, merge, etc. So then we need to ask the question of, what are crypto's values? What do we actually want to coordinate? What divisions of labor make sense? What are the internal relations between the different areas of work, different research fields, different engineering disciplines? How do we associate those with specific denominations? Then figure out a capital structure of tokens and flows. So what would that actually look like? At the moment, we live in this kind of supply-side driven world where there are a small number of high market cap tokens, and those tokens kind of internalize ecosystems. Like they try to build out internal research functions, internal engineering functions, stuff like this. And a world of crypto on scale-free money would sort of invert this dynamic. So if we think about which values exist in crypto and what things we want to do research in and build, we can organize the denominations associated with those on the basis of like the internal relations of the actual work. So, distributed systems is a research field. Cryptography is a research field. Programming languages is a research field. We could structure those fields as research guilds, gives them tokens. We can use those tokens to allocate funding and kind of set up mutual issuance or mutual credit or stuff like this for things which are related to each other. We could associate tokens with vertically integrated applications, things which are directly user-facing, associate tokens with stuff like open source hardware, which we certainly need. It's becoming more and more apparent that the walled gardens of Apple and Google are not going to be that friendly to crypto, and as soon as the US government steps in, they're definitely not going to be friendly. And I think that this would particularly help with capital efficiency. Crypto's capital efficiency as a field in terms of like what it produces in research and engineering versus capital inputs is pretty bad. I think it's atrocious. A lot goes towards duplicated work on the basis of bad theories of money and just companies by virtue of the dominance of these bad theories of money having to internalize and duplicate everything. Open source research and work is great, and we have a strong cultural tradition of this. And open source research and work can be much more efficient as long as it is associated with tokens and value flows actually organized on the basis of the internal relations of the work. So this could multiply capital efficiency by orders of magnitude, I think. Yeah, and we could then sort of organize all these flows on the basis of internal structure as opposed to specific organizations. So as a quick recap, theories of money. A theory of money is a theory of how to use crypto as a tool to help the user move the world towards the state they prefer. The advantage of a value-neutral theory of money is that users could agree on it, even if they disagree on what is valuable. Scale-free money is a candidate value-neutral theory of money that I've sort of sketched. Scale-free money features a multiplicity of tokens associated with different values and objectives, which are always shifting. And scale-free money can provide the user a theory of how the impacts of their actions affect their values, affect what happens in the world. Crypto should care because crypto is stuck in a wheel. That wheel is eventually self-terminating. We need an understanding of what crypto is as a whole, the ability to organize resource allocation on this basis, and the ability to regulate our internal value flows in accordance with it. And scale-free money would kind of give us a template to rework this kind of capital structure and probably have much greater efficiency. So my goal here is not really to convince you that this specific theory of money is correct. My goal is to convince you that theory of money is something that can be taken seriously as a science. It's not just something that we should discuss in narrative on Twitter. It's not just something that we should kind of joke about or say, quietly in dark rooms and hope the public doesn't hear. It's something that we can pin down and agree on because we can articulate it in a way that doesn't require agreeing on what is valuable. We don't have to do this. We could just keep going with X is money. I think, then crypto's trajectory looks more like eventual self-termination, some nice applied cryptography research, maybe some more private communications. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's perhaps not as interesting as if we take a theory of money seriously, self-organize the wheel, everyone is happy, needs more math. We should consider it. Thank you.